The industrial docks of Zyara Prime stretched into the dim horizon, a labyrinth of towering cargo stacks and humming machinery. The faint light from the Council's citadel glinted off metallic surfaces, casting long, shifting shadows. Captain Sarah Vega crouched low, her body tense, eyes scanning the perimeter. The squad was ghostly silent behind her, their movements precise and deliberate. "Keep it quiet," she whispered into her comm, her voice barely audible over the low mechanical thrum surrounding them. "Diaz, you're on point. We move in 30. Corporal Diaz nodded, his face illuminated briefly by the soft glow of his datapad. "Got it, Cap?" "Almost through the encryption." The team was operating on a hunch, but Sarah had learned long ago to trust her instincts. Rumors had filtered down through their intelligence channels that the Galactic Council wasn't merely calling for peace. There was something darker beneath the surface, something that could tip the fragile balance humanity had only just begun to secure. Diaz's voice broke the tense silence. "Got it. Transmission logs from this dock tie directly to a fleet assembling near Delta Crux. Looks like pre-launch protocols for a large-scale strike." Sarah's stomach nodded. She'd suspected treachery, but hearing it confirmed was different. "Targets? Earth colonies. All major ones?" The weight of the revelation settled over the squad like a suffocating fog. Sarah tapped her earpiece. "Squad, new objective. We extract this intel and exfil, quietly. If they catch us, we're done." The squad moved with practiced efficiency, weaving between stacks of crates labeled with alien glyphs. The air smelled metallic, tinged with the acrid bite of machinery. Halfway to the rendezvous point, a sharp hiss cut through the air. Sarah froze, holding up a clenched fist. Ahead, the faint shimmer of a stealth field flickered. "Ambush," she muttered. A guttural voice echoed from the shadows, low and menacing. "Humans shouldn't meddle in council affairs." The field dropped, revealing half a dozen alien mercenaries, tall, reptilian creatures with armored plating and glowing visors. They raised energy rifles in unison. "Scatter!" Sarah barked, diving for cover. Bolts of searing plasma lit the dockyard, sizzling against metal crates. Sarah rolled behind a container and returned fire, her rifle's staccato bursts answering the mercenaries' barrage. "Diaz! Secure the intel!" Sarah shouted over the din. "On it!" he called back, his fingers flying across his datapad as he crouched behind cover. The fight was brutal and unrelenting. Private Anders went down with a shout, a plasma bolt grazing his leg. Sarah dragged him into cover, her teeth gritted as she fired off another round to keep the mercenaries at bay. "Cap, they're flanking us," Private Hayes warned. Sarah's mind raced. She grabbed a smoke grenade from her belt and tossed it into the open. Thick, choking clouds filled the air, obscuring vision. "Move!" she commanded, hauling Anders to his feet. The squad pushed through the smoke, disoriented shouts from the mercenaries ringing out behind them. By the time the air cleared, they were already slipping into the network of maintenance tunnels beneath the docks. In the relative safety of their temporary safe house, a cramped, dimly lit storage room deep beneath the dockyards, the squad regrouped. Anders winced as Hayes applied a med patch to his leg. "Diaz, tell me you've got something," Sarah said, pacing. Diaz looked up, his face pale. "Not just something. Everything. Fleet composition, timelines, target maps. It's all here. They're planning to hit Earth colonies simultaneously, decapitate our leadership, cripple our supply lines." Sarah leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply. "They've already started locking this planet down. We won't get this intel to command through normal channels." "Then what's the plan?" Hayes asked, his voice edged with fatigue. "We warn the delegation," Sarah said firmly. "They have to know what they're walking into." Diaz hesitated. "Cap, the Council's controlling all outgoing comms. If we try to break through, they'll know it's us." "Let them know," Sarah said, fire in her eyes. "If they want a fight, we'll give them one. But I'm not letting Earth fall because a bunch of bureaucrats decided we were expendable." A sharp beep interrupted her. Diaz checked his datapad, his expression darkening. They already know. Security's sweeping the docks. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they find this place. Sarah tightened her jaw. Then we're moving now. Everyone gear up. This mission just became personal. The squad sprang into action, their fear channeled into swift, purposeful movements. Sarah checked her rifle and glanced at her team. Exhausted but resolute, they looked to her for guidance. No one's dying on my watch, she said, her voice steady. We're getting out of here, and we're stopping that fleet. Let's move. As they slipped back into the labyrinth of tunnels, Sarah's mind churned with the weight of their mission. The Council's betrayal wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. And Sarah Vega wasn't about to let humanity fight it alone. The Galactic Council's citadel loomed above Zyara Prime, a sprawling masterpiece of crystalline architecture shimmering under the planet's perpetual twilight. Its imposing spires and intricate bridges symbolize unity, though Sarah Vega only saw it as a den of duplicity. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, humming with an undercurrent of tension. Sarah adjusted the collar of her borrowed diplomatic robe, its embroidered fabric heavy and unfamiliar. Beside her, Corporal Diaz wore the guise of a tech consultant, his nervous energy barely hidden behind a neutral expression. Relax, Diaz, Sarah murmured as they stepped into the main atrium. The chamber was enormous, filled with alien delegates in vibrant attire, their languages overlapping in a symphony of incomprehensible noise. Easy for you to say, Cap, Diaz muttered. You don't have to mingle with beings who look like they'd eat you for fun. Focus, Sarah replied, scanning the room. Their mission was clear: gain access to the Council's secured data core and retrieve evidence of the fleet's imminent strike. The disguises had gotten them inside, but now came the hard part. A server droid hovered by, offering drinks on a gleaming tray. Sarah took one, more for appearances than thirst. As she raised the glass, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Chancellor Virex Ser. The Draconis leader exuded an air of predatory confidence. His scaled armor gleamed under the chamber's lights, and his piercing yellow eyes surveyed the room with practiced intensity. Sarah's pulse quickened as their gazes locked. Captain Vega, Virex said, his voice smooth, tinged with condescension. I didn't expect to see a ranger amidst such esteemed company. Sarah forced a tight smile. And I didn't expect a Draconis to bother with pleasantries. It's a day of surprises. Virex chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. Humans do have a talent for defying expectations. I trust you're finding our hospitality enlightening? Absolutely, Sarah replied evenly. The Council's transparency is truly something to admire. His eyes narrowed slightly, the faintest hint of a threat in his expression. Enjoy your evening, Captain. I'm sure you'll find it memorable. As he moved away, Diaz leaned in. Cap, tell me that wasn't as bad as it looked. It's worse, Sarah said. He knows we're here for something. Let's move. They wove through the crowd, careful to maintain their cover. Their target was the restricted wing where the Council's data core was housed. The route was heavily monitored, but Sarah's team had prepared for this. Signal the others, Sarah whispered. Diaz tapped his earpiece, relaying a coded message to Private Hayes and Specialist Juno, positioned in the maintenance tunnels beneath the citadel. Seconds later, the lights flickered, and a faint vibration rippled through the floor. Diversion in play, Diaz confirmed. The temporary disruption drew attention, with security personnel moving to investigate. Sarah and Diaz slipped through an unguarded side corridor, the sound of hurried footsteps masking their own. The restricted wing was colder, quieter, the hum of energy conduits resonating through the walls. Sarah approached the data core's access panel, a sleek console glowing with alien symbols. Diaz, you're up. He knelt by the panel, pulling out a modified datapad. Give me 2 minutes. Sarah kept watch, her senses sharp. The corridor stretched long and empty, but she knew better than to trust the silence. Almost there, Diaz murmured, his fingers flying across the pad. Make it faster, Sarah urged. The console beeped, and the access door slid open. Inside, the data core stood like a monolithic obelisk, pulsating with streams of light. Diaz stepped forward, connecting his pad to the core. Downloading now. This is, whoa. Cap, this isn't just fleet data. It's everything. Operations, troop movements, blackmail material on half the galaxy's leaders. Sarah's jaw tightened. Grab what we need and wipe the rest. No way we're leaving this for the Council to use. Diaz hesitated but nodded. The download progress ticked upward. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Diaz. Almost there. The door hissed open. 2 armored guards stepped in, their weapons rising instinctively. Sarah moved like a coiled spring. Her rifle was in her hands before they could shout, a single shot dropping the first guard. The second fired, narrowly missing her, as she rolled behind a console. Diaz! Done! He shouted, yanking the pad free. Sarah fired again, her shot finding its mark. The second guard collapsed with a heavy thud. Move! She ordered, pulling Diaz out the door. The corridor was no longer silent. Alarms blared, and distant voices shouted commands. They're locking this place down, Diaz warned. Sarah led the way back toward the main atrium, her mind racing. The diversion wouldn't hold for long, and their disguises were now useless. As they neared the atrium, a detachment of guards rounded the corner. Sarah ducked into a side passage, yanking Diaz with her. We'll never make it out through the front, she said. We need another exit. Diaz consulted his pad. There's a service hatch 2 levels down. Leads to the maintenance tunnels. Then let's move. Navigating the labyrinthine passages was a race against time. The alarms were growing louder, the walls seeming to close in with each turn. They reached the hatch just as more guards appeared at the far end of the corridor. Sarah shoved Diaz through first, firing a suppressive burst to keep the guards at bay. She dropped through the hatch just as plasma bolts sizzled past her, the clang of the hatch ceiling behind them. The maintenance tunnels were damp and dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of coolant and oil. Sarah's breathing was heavy, her mind running through their next steps. Cap, we've got the data, Diaz said, his voice steady despite their close call. But getting it off-planet is going to be a whole new fight. Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we'll fight. Whatever it takes. As they disappeared into the depths of the tunnels, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of Virex's gaze, the unspoken challenge in his words. The Council had underestimated humanity. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The Draconis warship Eviscerator was a fortress among stars, its hulking silhouette bristling with weaponry. Orbiting above Zyara Prime, it was both a command center and the crown jewel of the Council's assault fleet. To Captain Sarah Vega, it was the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Final checks, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension gripping the team. They crouched in the cramped confines of a stolen maintenance pod, drifting toward the warship under the guise of a scheduled repair. Diversion is prepped, Hayes reported over comms. He and Specialist Juno were aboard a scavenged cargo freighter, waiting for the signal to create chaos in the shipyard. Diaz adjusted the straps on his gear, his fingers twitching. And us? We just stroll into the flagship like we belong? Close, Sarah said dryly. Once inside, we plant the virus, sabotage their systems, and make it out alive. Simple. Diaz snorted but didn't argue. The pod clanked as it docked with the warship. A faint hiss signaled the connection was secure. Sarah's pulse quickened as the hatch opened, revealing a dimly lit maintenance bay lined with tools and conduits. Stay sharp, she whispered. The team slipped out, moving with practiced precision. The bay was eerily quiet, the hum of the ship's engines their only companion. Diaz checked his datapad. Main systems hub is 3 decks up midship. Sarah nodded. Then let's move. Keep it quiet. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, avoiding patrols and bypassing security checkpoints. The warship's scale was staggering, its halls vast and imposing. Each step deeper into enemy territory felt like a tightening noose. At a junction, Sarah held up a fist, signaling the team to stop. voices echoed faintly from a nearby corridor. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding as the voices drew closer. 2 Draconis engineers passed by, engrossed in conversation about shield calibrations. Sarah exhaled softly as they disappeared around the corner. "Clear," she murmured, motioning for the team to continue. When they reached the system's hub, Diaz set to work on the access panel. The room was a nexus of conduits and terminals, the air humming with the energy of the ship's operations. "This is it," Diaz said, plugging in his datapad. Streams of alien code flooded the screen as he worked to inject the virus. "How long?" Sarah asked, keeping her eyes on the entrance. 5 minutes, maybe less, Diaz replied. "Make it 3," Sarah said, her voice clipped. The sound of boots on metal grated in the distance. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle, her senses on high alert. "Cap," Diaz whispered urgently. "We've got a problem. The virus is in, but it needs a manual trigger at the core to activate." Sarah cursed under her breath. "Location?" "Primary Command Center, upper deck," Diaz said grimly. Before she could respond, an alarm blared, shattering the tense silence. The corridor outside erupted in noise as guards converged. "Move!" Sarah barked. The team bolted, plasma bolts searing past them as they ducked into a side corridor. The ship's defenses were awake now, and every second felt like a fight for survival. The command center was a sprawling chamber dominated by a central dais, its surface awash with holographic displays. Chancellor Virex there stood at the helm, his imposing figure radiating authority. When Sarah and Diaz burst in, rifles raised, Virex turned with a slow, measured grace. "Well," he said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "The tenacious humans arrive at last." "Step away from the console," Sarah ordered, her tone ice-cold. Virex tilted his head, an amused glint in his eyes. "You've come all this way for sabotage? Admirable, but futile. Do you truly believe you can halt the inevitable?" Sarah didn't flinch. "We don't stop. Not for you, not for anyone." Virex chuckled, low and menacing. "Your resilience is commendable. It's also your greatest flaw." He moved with startling speed, drawing a blade from his side. Sarah met him head-on, their clash brutal and immediate. The room became a blur of motion. Diaz ducked behind a console, frantically inputting the final commands while Sarah fought to hold off Virex. The Draconis Chancellor was a formidable opponent, his strikes calculated and relentless. "You fight well," Virex said, his voice strained as their weapons locked. "But this is a battle you cannot win." Sarah gritted her teeth. "We'll see about that." With a surge of strength, she shoved him back, firing a shot that grazed his shoulder. He snarled, but before he could retaliate, a low hum filled the room. Diaz shouted, "Virus is live! Core systems are crashing!" The ship shuddered violently as the sabotage took effect. Lights flickered, alarms wailed, and the hum of engines faltered. Virex roared in fury, lunging at Sarah one last time. She sidestepped, delivering a blow that sent him sprawling. "It's over," she said, her voice firm. Virex laughed, blood staining his sharp teeth. "For now, perhaps. But you've only delayed the inevitable." Sarah didn't respond. She turned to Diaz. "We need to go. Now." The team raced through the chaos of the warship, every step a battle against collapsing systems and pursuing guards. Explosions rocked the corridors, the sabotage spreading like wildfire. At the maintenance bay, Hayes and Juno waited in the stolen pod. "Took you long enough," Hayes shouted over the din. "Go!" Sarah ordered as they dove inside. The pod detached just as a massive explosion engulfed part of the warship. The eviscerator listed, its once imposing form now a burning wreck. In the relative safety of their ship, Sarah slumped into a seat, exhaustion washing over her. The mission had succeeded, but the cost lingered in her mind. Diaz sat across from her, his expression somber. "We bought Earth time. But he's right, isn't he? They'll come back." Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll be ready." They'll learn what it means to underestimate humanity. As the stars streaked past the viewport, the warship fading into the distance, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of hope. The fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle. And for now, that was enough.